be in bare feet. The person has to be in bare feet. Probably the single most common mistake made in lab practical exam 2 is people don't take off their shoes. Okay?
Why?
Okay. So the easiest way to measure trunk flexion is called fingertip to floor. Okay?
Yeah.
So all I need you to do is put your hands forward and let them drop straight down and try to touch the floor, keeping your knees straight. Okay? So she's at 0. All right? She's actually at beyond 0. But I would document that as 0 centimeters. Can you pretend to not go quite as far for me? Do you want an example?
Let's see you do it,
So I'm going to measure from the third digit to the floor, and I'm measuring straight down. Thank you. Come on back up. So she's at 20.1 centimeters. Now, the problem for me for the fingertip to floor is I wasn't able to see any of her movement, any of the quality of her movement. So this would not be the only thing I would do with her. I would also want to be standing behind her and watching her flex so that I could see how her spine is moving. But for trunk range of motion, for flexion, this is one way you can do it. Okay? Super, super simple. Now, the next way, I'm going to have you go ahead and turn around. This is called the modified Schober. Yeah, really. M squared Schober. So do you mind if I lift up your shirt? Oh, sure. Okay. And I might have to lower your shorts or your pants a little bit. Is that okay? Sure. Okay. So, those of you who are over there, you're going to want to come back. We didn't palpate this structure because we skipped palpation, so we're a little bit out of sequence. But again, to find the PSISs, what does PSIS stand for?
Posterior superior iliac spine.
It was great. I couldn't tell you. So I'm going to stand with your feet shoulder width apart. Thank you. Good. Okay, so I'm back to finding her iliac crest, just like we did in supine. My thumbs are naturally going to drop off into these valleys. I am now hooking right under her PSISs. Okay, so iliac crest, and then your thumbs fall down. If you have smaller hands, they probably won't. A lot of people will have dimples right next to their PSISs. So when you find the dimple, you're in the right spot, but you may have to work that area because you want to be able to hook under the PSISs. Okay, so I'm under and I'm sliding up. Sarah, of course, is crooked. Let's look it up. Sarah, normal one of the bunch? Do you mind if I mark on you? So I'm going to put a small line between her two PSISs. And this is where when you practice, you really need to make sure you scrub because I'd prefer you not come to class pre-marked. Okay? So the modified Schober, there we go, is you're going to make the mark on a line between the two PSISs, and then you're going to measure 15 centimeters up. Holding the tape close to the skin. So that's 15 centimeters. So now what I'm going to have you do is go ahead and bend forward and touch your toes. And so now she is at, go ahead and pull back up. She's at 21.8. So she moved 6.8 centimeters. Normal for this one is 6 centimeters. Okay? Now, hopefully you can see a problem with that as far as people at different heights. Those norms are going to be kind of crazy. Okay, so that's how you're going to do the modified Schober for forward flexion. Two parts to that. Okay. So the fingertip to floor is getting everything. It's getting hip motion, it's getting lumbar spine motion, thoracic spine, flexion, cervical flexion. So fingertip to floor is the grossest measure of just generally how someone functions when you ask them to flex. The modified Schober is attempting to isolate motion of the lumbar spine, and that you're only taking a measurement encompassing the lumbar spine, and so any differences there, it won't capture movement at the hip. It won't capture movement in the thoracic spine. Okay? So the next one is to go from C7 to the PSIS. So here I'm going to untuck your shirt here, and then I'm going to find your C7. So that's T1. Of course, it's not very convenient place. So I'm going to put a third mark on you. One time I was treating a husband and wife, and they started leaving messages to me on each other's backs. So then, but then I started leaving messages back, and it got a little full. So
It's a bit of enmeshment right there.
So here what we're doing is we're starting in this position, and we've got, now this time we're not going to have it tight to the back, and she's starting at 50. Is she straight? Nick, is she straight? Yep. Okay. So she's at 50.5. Maybe go ahead and go forward for me. Now notice I'm keeping it on C7, and then go ahead and come back up. And she's at 59.2. So for this one, I'm going to document that difference again. Okay. Now for extension, we're not going to have a fingertip to floor for extension. Okay, good. But for the modified shoulder and the C7 to the PSIS, we can. So I'm just going to tuck you back up here. I'm going to have you put your hands on your hips. And what I want you to do is, I've lost my bottom mark here. So again, this should be 15 centimeters, right? So I'm going to put my marker here. What I want you to do is start with your head and go ahead and lean back as far as you can. Correct. Okay, good. And come on back up. So she's at 12.2. So here what we're going to do is subtract 12.2 from 15. So she would be at 2.8, okay, centimeters of extension. Now notice that when she came back, I did not keep it held to her skin. I allowed it to gap away from her skin. Okay? We would do the same thing if we were doing C7 to PSIS. We would get that measurement, have her come back, and then measure the difference. Okay?
With the original 15 were you to her skin?
So here, when we make that mark, we're holding it to the skin, but then for any other measurement, we're not holding it onto the skin. Okay?
So for extension, and any other mark, you don't hold it to the skin?
Right. So go ahead and extend for me again. So now, I can't see my marks, but see how it's not touching her skin?
But what about when you start?
Well, I've already made. I already made that mark. You just need to make that mark once for both flexion and extension.
Gotcha.
Okay. Now the last. Oh no, there's not. There's two more. For lateral flexion, what you're going to do is you're going to do a fingertip to floor, but now it's lateral flexion. So Sarah, what I'd like you to do is slide this hand and down your leg, but actually just instead of sliding it down your leg, just let it fall. Do you know what I mean? Don't keep it tight, just let gravity take it. And keep your fingers straight for me. And keep your foot flat, wave your cheek. And she's rotating. Okay, so come on back up. So I'm going to hold your pelvis, and I want you to go ahead and do that motion again for me. Good. Okay, can you hold it there for just a second? Okay, and I'm going to have you keep your fingers straight. Oh, the tape measures. Okay, go ahead and come on back up. So she's actually at 46.9. So now, again, I care a lot more about the quality of motion, so let's have you do that motion again. Okay, is she laterally flexing at all here? No, she's dead straight, so it's all happening right there, right? So again, I find that interesting because it should be a nice curve. Let's have you go the other way. Oh no. Okay, So we see some asymmetry there. I find that very interesting, and so that's where I would want to go in and see why is that motion occurring at one segment. Why does she have that asymmetry? So again, the number is just a detail. What I care more about is the quality of movement. Okay, so that's how you're going to measure lateral flexion, is just fingertip to floor. Are you up for me to show you the last one, or are you feeling full? Okay. All right. So I'm going to have you sit on the side of the table here. What we're left with is rotation. And honestly, rotation in the lumbar spine just isn't that interesting. I care a lot more about lateral flexion and extension. But I will show you how to measure it. It's a little bit goofy. You are going to go from the lateral acromion on one side. So I'm going to have you cross your arms across your chest. You can relax your elbows. Yeah, we just need your ponytail a little higher. That'd be perfect. So, so this is a little tricky, right? Because we haven't palpated greater trochanter either. So in all of you, while you're standing, put your hands on the side of your hips. Have you dissected greater trochanter? We're doing it now. Okay. Take your foot and medially and laterally rotate it, and your greater trochanter will pop out. It's relatively low compared to your iliac crest. Okay, do you feel it? That's going to be your greater trochanter. For rotation,
That's good.
So I'm starting at her lateral acromion. I'm crossing her back. Okay, and I've got extra tape pulled. What she's going to do is, now what I'd like you to do is rotate towards your left without, yeah, there you go. So I would have taken an original number, and then the tape measure moves. Go ahead and relax. And so my final number is 76, 77, I'll call it. I didn't get the first number. But again, I would document the difference between those two numbers. So if I wanted to measure rotation in the opposite way, I'm here, I have a number which is 69.2, and go ahead and rotate to your right, please. And now I'm at 75.8.
How do you document which side?
So when she rotates this way, she's rotating right. So I document right rotation, 7.2 centimeters. Left rotation, which would be this way, is whatever. Okay, so the ways that we covered 3 different ways to use a tape measure to measure forward flexion. We talked about simply fingertip to floor, which is the grossest measure, which is capturing motion in all sorts of joints. Then there's the modified Schober, which is the 15 centimeters. You have to find the PSISs, measure up 15 centimeters, and then have the person flex, and you document the difference. Then the third way is going from that line at the PSIS all the way up to C7. Now you're capturing the motion, the flexion motion of the lumbar and thoracic spine. Okay, so those are the 3 ways for flexion. For extension, we don't have fingertip to floor, but we can use the modified Schober, and we can use the C7 to PSIS. Okay. For lateral flexion, we have fingertip to floor. Often compensations are to bend the knee, to lift the leg. Okay. The other thing is you don't want the hand to stay next to the leg because that will alter your measurement. You really want the arm to just drop to the side. And you're measuring off of typically the 3rd digit because that's the longest digit to the floor. So that's lateral flexion. And then rotation is this somewhat goofy one where you're going from the acromion to the greater trochanter and then having them rotate away. Okay?